What's up, guys? We're high energy today. Welcome back to Jimmy Talks. Let's get into the mess that Gen Z, which are those born between 1997 and 2012, commonly deals with. This generation's got a lot going on, and it's not just the usual problems that past generations also faced, but also overcame. We have stuff like mental health struggles, money problems, the loneliness epidemic, and a country that feels like it's tearing itself apart with the extreme political divide. So one could reasonably say Gen Z has some serious issues to face. I'm going to break all this down with part one of the video laying out the problems, and part two explaining the solutions to these problems and keeping it in order as well in part one and in part two. Refer to the timestamps to find your place. Part one, again, will have the problems, as I just said, and then once you hit part two, you'll find the solutions. Just proper formatting here so that I can help you absorb the message easier. All right, let's go off on part one. The problems are first one. First up, mental health. Gen Z is struggling with anxiety and depression at rates we've never seen before. A 2023 study showed that over 60% of Gen Z dealing with one or both of these, anxiety and depression, at a way higher rate than what older generations went through at the same age. So we have constant stress. We have people that are constantly feeling down. We have people that are legitimately chronically depressed and anxious, or just not being able to shake the worrisome, features of life. And it's messing with school, work, and friendships in a drastic manner. So what's causing it, one may ask? I think personally that social media is a big culprit here. We're not going to go into the solution yet. I just wanted to point that out real quick. Apps like Instagram and TikTok always make it seem like you've got to be perfect all the damn time. And the comparison game, you have to play it with someone else's highlight reels. It's really bad for people's mental health. Then there's the money problems. We'll get into that in the next section. But also the world feels less connected, which is funny because a lot of the internet it connected a lot of people, really, but it's just through screens now. And a lot of people used to find support in things like church or close-knit families, but those are fading away for a lot of Gen Z. Gen Z is going to church more, specifically men, as of very recently, but we'll touch up on this later. With a solid foundation like this, like church and all that, it's easy to feel lost, and that's feeling a lot of the mental health struggles. So next, money problems. Let's talk about how tough it is just to get by. Everything costs way more than it did for our parents and our grandparents. Houses, college, food, cars, insurance, fucking everything. Prices are sky high, but the paychecks don't match the increase in prices. Back in 1980, the average house cost about $47,000, which was roughly 3 times what people made in a year, which was around $21,000. So a house cost $47K, people made $21K. Really not a huge difference there. It's workable, right? So now though, a house is over 400 grand on average, but the average household income is only about 80 grand. And still, almost half the country makes less than 80 grand. So that's more than 5 times the income. So good luck saving up for that. College is also just as bad. A regular standard state school, public university, you see your average college used to cost about $2,000 a year, adjusted for inflation. Now it's over $9,000 a year, and private schools can be up to $40,000 a year. Meanwhile, wages are not moving with the increased costs of fucking everything. Our purchasing power has sunk since 2000. Paychecks have only gone up about 0.2% a year when you account for inflation. So probably even going into the negatives, to be honest, with the most recent inflation. And speaking of inflation again, it's been climbing since the early 2000s with the global war on terror, useless foreign wars, sending money to other countries, yada yada, paying for illegal immigrants. But inflation went insane after COVID, hitting 8.5% in 2022. And that's just the official government report. I don't believe that at all, personally. Just compare 2019 grocery prices to 2025. That's the real inflation right there. Look at the price of a fucking Big Mac nowadays. A Big Mac is like $7 or $8. In 2019, it was $4. And you're telling me that inflation was only 8%. Okay, got it. Everything's more expensive. They just don't believe what they say. So this means that your money buys less every single year. The government's been printing cash like it's nobody's business. And all that spending on stuff like foreign aid to other countries is not helping. It's no wonder Gen Z feels like they're running on a treadmill just to stay in place. Let's touch up on the next one. The pressure to keep up. There is this huge pressure to live up to what older generations did. Back in the day, boomers and Gen X had it easier in some ways. Take, for example, after World War II. Let me clarify. Boomers had an easier time. Gen X, I would say boomers had it much easier. But anyways, after World War II, the economy was booming, probably the best economy this country has ever seen, with houses being cheap, college for the year being able to be paid off with a part-time summer job at McDonald's, just being a cashier somewhere. Nothing wrong with those jobs, by the way. It's just the stress that entry-level jobs could pay off some serious loans if need be. Anyways, a single paycheck back then could cover a family and a mortgage, with dad working and mom being a stay-at-home mom. Now, Gen Z is looking at $43,000 in student debt on average, and only 34% of people under the age of 35 own homes. By the way, if you go to college, hope it's for something good, because you might not even get a degree. You might not even get a job with that degree. I'm not editing out the talking mistakes here because I want this to sound real, okay? But, half of us don't own houses anymore because the boomers hoard all the houses they bought for a fucking blueberry and $5 back in the 60s. Everyone's got a side hustle nowadays just to barely afford to make ends meet. It sometimes feels like the game's rigged. It just feels like some bullshit. Social media doesn't help, with people showing off these picture-perfect lives that make you feel like you're failing if you don't have a house, a fancy job, or a family by 25. Plus, stuff like high property taxes, zoning laws make it even harder to buy a home or to build one. So Gen Z stuck chasing goals that feel out of reach compared to the other generations. You should have a house by now. You should have a career by now, said the fucking boomer who did all this shit in the 70s and the 80s. Okay. Yeah, it's a completely different time, man. All right, that was 50, 60 years ago at this point. So, anyways, let's touch up on the loneliness epidemic. Gen Z is the most connected generation ever with phones, but, they're also the loneliest generation. A 2023 study found that 79% of Gen Z feels lonely. Way more than any other generation. More people are staying single for longer, fewer are getting married, and marriage rates are dropping steadily. Dating apps are fucking exhausting, and a lot of people are just giving up. Part of this is because we've moved away from things that used to bring people together, like family get togethers and church. Instead, there's this focus on doing your own thing, which sounds great on paper, but it leaves a lot of people feeling empty. Social media is the worst culprit here, as it's like you're connected to everyone, but also nobody. At the same time, you're scrolling, but you're not bonding with anybody. Next, let's touch up on the political divide, which is humongous due to propaganda and politicians with their own self-serving interests. It used to be that people with different political views, like left or right or whatever, could actually sit down and find some common ground. Not anymore, though. The red pill and the great noticing is too great. The political divide is over stuff like free speech, social justice, or whatever it is. Things have gotten so bad that it's not just arguing. There's actual real political violence. The 2020 BLM riots, Luigi Mangione, which was a politically motivated assassination. Whether you think it's right or wrong, it is political violence. Online, in the political spheres, people are doxing each other, saying they're swatting people, they're threatening each other left and right. It's like everybody has just gone extreme. And a lot of this comes from things like identity politics, where people get split up into groups like race, gender, or whatever the fuck, and it's us versus them. There's nothing wrong with pride in your heritage, but it's taken next level extremes. So that plus shutting down anyone who disagrees makes it hard to even have a conversation anymore. All right, so that's part one. Let's do a real quick synopsis before I move on to the solutions here. I was slapping my hand right there as I'm talking. Part one, mental health struggles, money problems, pressure to live up to past generations' benchmarkers for achievement, the loneliness epidemic, and a country that feels like it's ripping itself apart. These actually aren't separate issues. They all feed into each other. All right, so let's go to part two, where I think these are going to be the solutions to these problems. Let's start off again. We're going in order. Fixing mental health. The anxiety and depression with Gen Z are tied to all the other stuff that we talked about. I just said that. Money, feeling alone, the pressure to feel perfect, it's all tied together. So solving those will help the mental health epidemic, but we can do some things right now too without solving those specific problems just yet. First off, we've got to stop acting like mental health issues are something to be ashamed of. The stigma behind it, a lot of times, it's not just about being weak. There can be some genuine chemical imbalances in someone's brain. So talking about it openly can make it easier for people to get help, whatever help that they need. Mental health is a wound just like a physical wound is, and you got to bandage that shit up. Here's another thing, and I know this one's going to piss people off, but I don't really care. I think we need to bring back Christianity. Actually, I don't think it, I know it. I'm a Christian, and I believe it's been a big part of what's held this country together. We're a Christian nation, after all. It's about having a place where people can share values and support each other. A 2020 study showed that people who go to church or other religious gatherings feel less lonely and depressed because they've got a community and a sense of purpose. For Gen Z, getting involved in church or something like that would be a massive W. It's a place to belong, and I think that's something that we're missing. All right, up next, my favorite one, getting the economy back on track. It just makes me so happy to think if Jimmy Talks was the president or if he was the dictator of America, I would be making things better, okay? That's a joke before someone's like, oh my God, you want to be a dictator. Oh my God, that's a Freudian slip. Shut the fuck up. Anyways, money problems. Big deal. Let's tackle it. We're high energy today. First, the government needs to stop printing money like it's free. That is what's driving inflation. Prices jumped 8.5% in 2022. Again, those are the official numbers. I actually think it's like closer to 50, and that's what eat away at your paychecks. Again, the official number, it's bullshit. It's much higher than that. You can prove this again with groceries and fast food costs. Compare the difference of a 2019 receipt to a 2025 receipt. So we also need to cut back on wasting money. Like $50 billion we spend on foreign aid. That cash should be used here instead, fixing our own problems. Obviously. Imagine if we stopped sending money to other countries for just 1 year. How much money we'd save. Imagine if the global war on terror never happened and we had $2 trillion, the cost of it. Imagine if we had $2 trillion to invest in our own infrastructure, healthcare, stuff like that. You don't even know what $2 trillion looks like. Imagine that in a fucking room. It would take up whole entire houses. Anyways, I'm not a total isolationist, and I do think the American empire does need to project its influence globally sometimes, but we need to cut back on this a little bit with this useless spending. More money, more foreign aid, give more money to Ukraine, give more money to Israel. Stop it. Up next, energy. This is another big one. We need to beef up our energy grid. We need more oil. We need more gas. We need more renewable energy. Projects like the Keystone Pipeline that were shut down could create thousands of jobs and bring down energy costs. With AI getting bigger, we're going to need more power. We're going to need cheaper stuff, being cheaper energy. And that's the way to do it is but cheaper energy. It's going to make everything cheaper. Groceries, gas, cars, housing, electronics, all of it. So now I'm going to piss people off again, but I don't care because I'm America first through and through. And we need to talk about illegal immigration. Estimates say that 10 to 20 million people came in under Biden. That puts a huge strain on jobs, housing, everything. When ICE raided that meat plant in Nebraska in June, so not too long ago, Americans lined up around the fucking building out to the streets for those jobs right after. That shows people here do want to work. This common Redditor trope that's like, Americans are lazy. They don't want to work. That's not the problem here. Americans do want to work. So that meat plant shows that Americans do want to work. It was illegal aliens taking the jobs from Americans. If that doesn't show you that Americans want to work, I don't know what to tell you. Americans do want to work. Statistics show that Native Americans, like people who live here, not the I am standing eagle Native American, right? They dominate every single field of work here in the U.S. So no, we don't need the illegals taking jobs away from American citizens. It's not that Americans don't want to work. What it actually is, what is the price? Americans don't want to work for slave wages. How do illegals afford to do this, though? Government assistance. You see a lot of illegal aliens in our country right now work 2 jobs because the companies pay them slave wages like it's some sort of feudal system feeding off of illegal aliens. And they have multiple families inside of a single family residence. They live in subsidized housing. They use the emergency room as their free healthcare. They use public schools. They use food assistance. People say Americans are lazy. They don't want to work. And this is not true. Americans don't want to be underpaid. Americans don't want to be the bottom of the totem pole in society. They don't want everything subsidized by the government. They have legal driver's licenses. They pay their car insurances. They pay their health insurance. They pay their student loan debt. They have mortgages. And that stuff's extremely expensive. Americans don't get government assistance for literally everything. Americans don't work under the table jobs and rely on this broken system. Americans do want to work, just not for slave wages at these companies who hire illegals and enable this broken workaround system. They say the economy would collapse without illegals working. Meanwhile, everything has gone up in price almost 50% seemingly in the past 5 years since 2020 because the fucking government printed out $10 trillion out of the air. But the economy's still doing fine. They say if we don't keep illegals, everything will go up in price. No, that's because you print out money and send it to foreign fucking countries. You need to deport all the illegals and people will have jobs and companies will be forced to spend more on either Americans or automations for jobs like when they say, oh, Americans, they don't want to clean the bathrooms and pick fruit or whatever they say illegals have to do just because they want to make more profit. The reason they don't hire Americans is because we demand more pay and healthcare, but illegals don't. And they don't have to do that legally for an illegal alien. They don't automate because the upfront investment is too much for them. But saying we need them because the economy will collapse while printing out money and companies wanting to squeeze out every inch of profit that they can is bullshit. The companies can afford it. The people who employ illegal immigrant labor are complicit in this problem and they just don't want to make less profit. The government also loves to spend. That's why our money is shit and that's how we fix it. And I didn't even get into how much cheaper gas would be with less demand and more supply, or how housing and rent would go down dramatically when you evict the illegals here so Americans can live there instead. Everyone's rent and house prices would go down dramatically if illegals were deported. I promise you. It would cripple the rent market. I harp on illegal immigration so much because it makes every problem we have in this country exponentially worse, and the proof is in the pudding. Replay this section if you need to. Next, college. Let's touch up on college. College costs are out of control, and policy alone will not fix this. We've got to stop telling people that college is the only way to make it in life. Some people just aren't cut out for college, and that's fine. Trade schools, apprenticeships, blue-collar jobs like plumbing, electrical work, they pay pretty well with way less debt. If we push those options instead, fewer people will go to college and universities will have to lower the prices to compete. It's about having talks with the future generation about what's out there. It's not just college. Okay? To make money go further, we also need less red tape. Businesses spend $1.9 trillion a year on average in the U.S. as a collective, just following government rules, and that price goes back to the consumer with increased pricing. We need to cut back on excessive government regulation, smartly, of course, not recklessly, and this can and will lower prices and pay workers more. Tax cuts help a lot. Simplifying taxes and cutting payroll taxes puts more cash in your pocket. Back in 2017, there was a tax cut that boosted the middle class take-home pay. Let's keep that going. Let's keep doing stuff like that. And finally, we need to make more stuff here, like domestic production, cars, houses, factories, everything. Bringing manufacturing back home cuts out the import fees that jack up the prices. We don't want to give jobs to China. We don't want to give jobs to India. We need to manufacture here. And again, the only reason we don't do it is because these companies want to squeeze out every inch of profit that they can, so they outsource it overseas. We saw 400,000 new factory jobs in the late 2010s when we focused on this. More jobs, cheaper goods, the economy gets better this way. I told you economy was my favorite. All right, we're going on to the next one. This pressure to succeed with the boomers, right? Gen Z's under this asinine pressure to live up to what boomers had. One could even argue that Gen X as well benefited from this, but we'll say the boomers. Houses, careers, all that stuff. But the economy's different now. Back then, you could buy a house on one income, and college didn't bury you in debt. That's gone. So we've got to stop comparing ourselves to that. Success doesn't mean to have a big house by 30. It could be learning a skill, starting a side hustle, or just living life on your own terms. Don't worry about keeping up with the Joneses, your neighbors, whatever. Focus on what makes you happy. I'm going to touch up on financial literacy. Budgeting, saving, investing in stuff like index funds. It's how you build wealth, even if you're not making a lot of money. Staying out of bad debt, like racking up a shit ton of money in student loans because we push college onto everybody, is the key here. You can't be pushing that on the people. We need to make financial literacy a mandatory class in middle school and high school so kids learn this stuff early. It takes the stress off of trying to match your parents' life in your 20s because that's just not possible anymore. Times have changed dramatically. Let's talk about housing prices again. High property taxes and zoning laws also make houses more expensive. And, besides the illegal migration mentioned earlier, there's suddenly 10 million extra people live here, 20 million, something like that. If we cut those taxes and we loosen up the zoning laws, it'll be easier to buy a home. That way, Gen Z doesn't have to work themselves to death trying to hit milestones that are not realistic anymore. Now, let's go to the next one, the loneliness epidemic. We can fix it by getting back to real connections. As I mentioned earlier, churches, we really need to bring these back. Community groups, local charities. These are places where you can meet people face to face and feel like you belong. We need a strong resurgence in community. Studies show that people who go to religious groups or volunteer feel less lonely because they're part of something bigger. Joining a church or helping out at a food bank can make a big difference for Gen Z, and we need to start doing this again. But we have this narrative that everything is about you instead. It's kind of like a Redditor narrative, to be honest. We've got to push back on this idea that it's all about you and nothing else matters. That kind of thinking is backwards, that it's not cohesive for a strong society. Instead, we should focus on family, duty, and community, and focus on our country and what brings us all together. Spending time with your parents or your grandparents, and even just grabbing dinner together, going to church together can make you feel more grounded. A 2021 study found that strong family ties cut down on loneliness big time. I'm not just saying shit here because I like hearing myself talk. All right, Gen Z needs to lean into these real world relationships. Studies back this up. Now, the political divide. The political divide is tearing people apart. And Gen Z can turn it around by talking like normal fucking people. First off, we need to bring back free speech and real debates, not shouting matches and the stupid canceling people shit. Starting groups on college campuses where people can talk about stuff like gun rights or taxes or whatever you want to talk about without turning it into this big screaming match and doxing and like swatting. That would really help. A 2022 survey said 66% of college kids think some topics are just they're too hot to touch. Let's put it that way. People are scared to even talk about stuff nowadays. Thank God Jimmy Talks is here. We've got to find things we all care about, like developing good work ethic and building strong communities. Stuff like volunteering together and celebrating holidays like the 4th of July with national pride and unity can remind us we're all more similar than we think. We shouldn't be attacking each other. We shouldn't be anti-American. We should be scrutinizing the ones in charge, actually. This comes to identity politics, where it's all about your race, it's all about your gender. This makes things even worse. It's so stupid. They use this as a tool to divide and conquer. Instead, treat people as people, not groups. Again, like I said in my past videos, pattern recognition, it's a lot different than legitimate hatred, okay? Get rid of DEI, implement fair hiring, get rid of the school admissions based on what you do and not who you are. I'm a transgender black woman and I'm Jewish and I'm also in a wheelchair. I can get into any college in America now. That's fucking stupid. If I'm all that and I'm like absolutely brilliant, then cool, get into college. But you have people getting into college based off of their race. Are you kidding me? Also, Gen Z needs to show some class. Stop with the threats and acting like a retard online. Do your own research. Don't just repeat what you see on TV, Reddit, the mainstream media, or TikTok. Stick to facts and you'll find it's easier to talk to people who don't agree with you. All right. That about wraps this one up. Gen Z's got a lot to deal with, but there's a way forward. It's not going to be easy, but if Gen Z steps up, they can make things better, not just for themselves, but for everyone. All right, guys. With all that being said, future President Jimmy Talks signing out. See you later. Stay true to yourselves. Jimmy Talks out.